In this video, I'm going to build this custom electric guitar from scrap and leftover parts I've collected over the years. This video is made up of clips from my 15-part series on this build. I'll leave links in the description to the full videos if you're interested in a deeper dive into any of these topics. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm building a new guitar from trash. Well, mostly trash. I've got this old Ibanez neck off an Ibanez Geo, which from what I understand is like the Squire of the Ibanez line. This particular one is off a GRX 20. I'm going to reshape the headstock. I'm going to replace the fret markers with some actual mother of pearl fret markers or maybe abalone. I have this 3-piece ash body blank. I realize this is not really trash. I ordered this thing over 10 years ago and it's just been sitting in my closet for all that time. Realistically, this isn't costing me anything. I already spent the money like over 10 years ago. So this is what I'll be using to cut the body out of. So, I mean, at least it's going to have a nice quality body on the thing. Well, at least the wood will be nice quality. We'll see how good I make it. So I got this pickguard blank. At the same time, I got this body blank. It does appear to have a pretty deep scratch. I'm hoping that's just in this plastic. So for the bridge, I got this Stratocaster style knockoff bridge. I don't recall what kind of guitar this was out of. All I can tell you is this bridge sucks. Like if you take a look at this sustain block, I mean, they put as little metal into this thing as they could get away with. These are the pickups that I think I'm going to be using in this guitar. And I also got this Stratocaster style output jack plate. I'm going to need to get some other parts like pots, a switch, wire, knobs, strap buttons, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I'm going to try to build the best guitar that I can, but with the cheapest components that I can get. Another challenge for this guitar is I don't have the proper equipment to build a guitar. So the first thing I'm going to do is design the body. The first thing I did was cut out some poster board the size of the body blank. The next thing I'm going to do is draw a center line on the poster board pieces. All guitars are designed off a center line. All right, so we got a center line. Now, because I'm lazy, I'm going to trace the body shape of another guitar onto this poster board. In this case, I'm using a Fender Jazzmaster. We're also going to take note of the body join fret on this particular guitar. So we got our 15th. So this has a 16th fret body join. So now we're going to take our guitar neck and we're going to place it with a 16th fret body join. Okay, so you see the line I got here? And I got my 16th fret right here. And I'm just going to kind of center it on this center line. I'm just going to trace the shape of the neck onto here. So now we know where our neck pocket will be. Next thing we got to do is figure out our scale length. So to do that, you measure from the nut, the inside of the nut, to the 12th fret. Here we have a measurement of 12 3/4 of an inch. So you multiply that by 2, you will get 25.5-inch scale length. So what we're going to do is put our tape measure down here. And again, this is not super accurate at this point. This is just to give us an idea. And I'm going to mark on the center line 25.5 inches. So this is where the saddle of our high E string will rest. The other strings, because I won't go into it, but the other strings will be a little bit behind this line, but this is where our high E string is going to end. Now we can go to town with our pencil and eraser, just designing our hearts away. You know what? I think I want to add a little bit of strat to the mix. All right. Okay, so that's my general process. I won't spare you the details of me going through and erasing and drawing and erasing and drawing, but this is basically how I've done this. What I'm going to end up going with is this shape, which is what you saw me starting with. It's based off the Jazz Master. It's got some Stratocaster elements incorporated, and it's kind of got the more pointier horns that you might see on like a SG or a Viper. What I'm going to do for this is I'm going to trace the existing headstock onto a piece of poster board. So now, like with the body, I'm just going to go to town again with a pencil and eraser until I have something that I'm into. Because this is an Ibanez neck, I think it's fitting to base this headstock off the Black Eagle head. Now, this is the headstock I'm talking about that's based off the Black Eagle headstock with a little bit of fender thrown into it. So this is a headstock we're going to be making for this guitar. So now we have the body shape and our head shape picked out. We have to design our pick guard. So I'm going to take the base plate from the bridge I'm using and trace it out at the scale length. So I'm just going to extend my scale length line that I made out just a touch here. So I got the bridge centered on the center line, and I've got it lined up so that the high E saddle is at the scale length. So now I'm just going to trace the outline of the bridge plate. Okay, so we got that. Now I got to trace out where my pickups will be. Put one there. We'll figure out the details later. We're just doing a rough layout right now. All right, so we got 2 humbuckers. Okay, that looks about right. Now we got to figure out where the switch, the knobs, and the output jack will go. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to run with this. Might as well, right? All right, so now we got our layout. All right, so now we get to design our pick guard. All right, so this is it. We got our guitar design. The next step will be to make some router templates. The process I used initially to make these templates was I took my sketches and cut them out. After I did that, I traced them out onto 1/4-inch hardboard. After I had them traced out onto the 1/4-inch hardboard, I cut them out with a jigsaw. I cut the line slightly outside of the trace line, and then I carefully sanded them to the line. This way I was able to ensure that they were perfect size, as well as to get them smooth. I have all my templates made. I still have to fix the pick guard, but I'm going to do that in the video where I make the pick guard. So I got my body outline template done. I've got both of my back templates for my tremolo cavity done. And I got my top routing template for the neck pocket, the sustain block, and the electronics done. I'll be using these templates to cut out the body. Since I don't have a real woodworking shop or proper guitar making equipment, I'm going to hit a couple snags and need to get creative. So let's get to work. The first thing I'm going to do is put on my safety glasses. I almost forgot to mention, these tools are extremely dangerous. The router, the jigsaw, even the hand tools can seriously injure you. If you don't have any experience using these tools and want to get into woodworking, I'd strongly suggest taking some in-person training. I'll also put a link to another video that I made where I go into a little bit more detail about using these tools at the top of the screen. The next thing I'm going to do is draw a center line on this body blank. Now that we got the center line on both sides of the blank, I'm going to take this template and draw the outline of the body onto the blank. So I just got to line up the center line of the template with the center line of the blank. Okay, now that it's lined up, I'm just going to trace it out. Do the outline again. Okay, so now we have our outline traced on the top and on the bottom of the blank. What I'm going to do now is attempt to cut this outline with my jigsaw. All right, so I got the body cut out with the jigsaw. It actually worked. Great. Now I have to figure out how to clamp it to my workbench in order to use the router on it. Okay, so the template is attached. The center lines are lined up. The body's attached to my workbench. So now we got to get into routering. So the key thing I want to show about this router bit is that it has a ball bearing here. So this ball bearing will ride on the edge of the template. And that's how you're able to use this bit to cut something out of a template. I've got my bit in here tight. I got my depths set. I'm going to put on my safety. Oh, I should clean my safety glasses. So now's the moment of truth, where the rubber meets the road. Wish me luck here. At this point, I think we can take our template off of here and just use the body to get the rest of our shape. All right, so here we go again for the second time. Okay, so we got the body shape cut out now. Oh boy, so we got some chip out there. Not happy about that. Got some there. Aside from that, it looks all right. All right, so you can see what I'm talking about here, where it got totally chipped out. The router just blew this whole chunk right out. And instead of cutting it, it just, I guess it just caught it and blew it out. And then we got a couple of pieces here. We got the first pass and the second pass where it also did that. These will be okay because it's gonna get, rounded over here. But here, I don't think the round over is gonna cover that. We'll see. We'll see how bad it is after I round it over, but I'm definitely not happy about that. I'm not sure if it's because I used wrong router technique or what. If you know, let me know in the comments because yeah, obviously I did something wrong. So now I'm gonna cut the hole for the neck pocket and the hole for the sustain block. I feel like it would be better to use this template for this because it's a little bit thicker and I'll be able to do this in a couple of cuts. All right, I'm gonna take a little break from the templates here and I'm gonna actually round over the edges here. So I've got, this is a 1/2 inch round over bit. It won't even fit in my router. Okay, so I also got a 3/8 round over, and that appears to fit in my router. So let's just see. Here goes nothing. Well, that kind of turned out better than I expected. So great. Cross our fingers here. Perfect. So now we just got to cut our hole for our springs, which we'll use this template for. All right, here's hoping we don't break off through the other side here. Okay, my bearing just disintegrated. So I got a new bearing. You can see the bearing is just disintegrated there. And so it's kind of messed up my cut. And it's not a huge deal. I'll be able to fix it. Here we go again. Fingers crossed. Okay, so it's all done being routed. The templates are done. Next step I gotta do is fill in this damage, then give it a nice sand, get everything all beautiful with sanding, getting it ready to paint. Okay, so I have my guitar neck here. And I also have this little pattern that I made of what I want it to look like when I'm done. As you can see, the pattern is bigger than what I have here. So I'm gonna have to graft on some extra wood. So this neck is made out of maple. So I got a piece of maple here that's gonna match up with the type of wood that we got here. So I'm gonna trim this headstock back a bit so it has some nice straight lines to attach to. To do this, I'm gonna have to scribe some lines on the neck. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is just sand this finish off of here. So it's gonna be easier to see the lines. Okay, so now that I got that finish all taken off of there. I'm just going to draw my lines. Okay, so I got my marks marked on the front and back of the headstock, as well as the edges. So now I just got to clamp this down and get cutting. See how this works. I guess my first cut wasn't in frame, but you didn't miss much. All I did was cut off this piece. Okay, so now I got my rough cut done. Now I'm just going to plane, potentially sand maybe, just to get this perfectly down to my line, perfectly straight. And I also want to get this edge perfectly square to both surfaces on the neck. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so now I have my two cuts made. They're perfectly straight, and they're both perpendicular to both the front face and the back face of the headstock. Now that this is done, I have to make this piece fit onto the new shape of the headstock. So I'm going to scribe the new shape of the headstock onto this piece of wood and then cut it out. So I have the new shape of the headstock traced out onto this new piece of wood. You can see all the axes is what I will be removing. So I've actually traced it all the way on all sides of this piece of wood so that I can hopefully get a perfect cut. So fingers are crossed that this will work out. Now all I have to do is cut it. Okay, so I was able to cut this piece out of here. So now I still have to sand it down to the line perfectly. But you can see what I was going for there, right? So now all I gotta do is just get these two surfaces to match the headstock perfectly. Okay, so now we got the perfect fit. Again, this is kind of hard to show filming with one hand, but we got the perfect fit there. Now all I have to do is glue this new piece onto the headstock. So we got another ridiculous setup here. Now this is how I'm going to glue this piece onto this headstock. So it's kind of crazy. I'll go over it. So the first thing is I have a piece of wood here that the neck is going to be pushed into this way. I have a piece of wood here that the neck is going to be, it's going to basically keep the neck from moving in this corner. Then we come over here and I have this piece of wood that the neck is going to be, the headstock is going to be pushed against. Now I have some washers down here and they're just to hold the neck slightly off of the table here. I've got some wax paper lined down so my glue does not, so I don't glue this to the table basically. So this is the piece I'm gluing on here, right? I have the piece here and then I've got these other pieces of wood screwed to the table. So how I'm going to clamp it is I'm going to drive these wedges, these two wedges in here. Once I have my glue, I'm going to push them in and I have screws in such a way that they're going to pull the wedges in the direction that tightens them. And hopefully that will give me enough clamping force. So the main thing is just to get a good coating of glue on both sides of what you're gluing. All right, so we got glue on all of our surfaces. Our neck is supported with the washers. We're going to put this here. Okay, I got squeeze out. So that's a good sign. We have enough glue. Now I'm going to get my wedges into position. Okay, so that seems to be working good. Now I'm just going to screw these wedges in. Okay, so this should be good now. Okay, so I got my wedges screwed in there. I've got some squeeze out happening with the glue, so I know I got enough glue in there. I know there's pressure holding it in. So, I guess now I just gotta go take a break. All right, so this had a chance to dry out overnight. Now I'm gonna get ready to sand this new piece down to the thickness of the headstock. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually cut it off, so I'm not having to sand all this extra wood that I don't actually need. Okay, so that's done. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now this side is all sanded down in the right thickness, so I'm gonna move on to the back side. Now that the headstock is a consistent thickness, we're ready to scribe out our new shape onto it and then cut it out. All right, so I've got the new shape scribed onto the headstock. Excuse me. Now I'm going to cut it out with my coping saw. All right, so I got cut down pretty close to the line with the coping saw. I probably could have got a little bit closer, especially there. But, you know, it's the way she goes. So now I'm just going to carefully sand it down to the line, and yeah, should be good after that. Okay, so we're done. We have successfully reshaped the headstock. Of course, you can obviously see where I patched in the new piece of wood. That's no problem for me because I'm going to be painting this headstock to match the body. I'm going to tear the frets out of this neck. After that, I'm going to tear out the fret markers. Then I'm going to install some new abalone fret markers. After that, I'm going to re-radius the neck and get it ready for the new frets that I'm going to install and level. Okay, so while I'm doing this work, I'm just going to support the neck on a sandbag. They do make fancy neck holders for this sort of thing, but I do not have one. So that turned out pretty good. This is where I started. You can see I got a little bit of damage at the first couple of frets. But as I go, it gets progressively better. So I don't know if that's because my technique improved or if it was because these lower frets got more, these lower frets got more steam. But we got all the old frets out. Let's tear out these fret markers. So there we go. I was able to get all the old fret markers out of there. Turns out you just need to heat them up and then, yeah, you jam a knife in the center and they can pop right out. Now I gotta get this nut out of here. So my last little tap was a little bit too hard and you can see I broke it. It really sucks, but that's okay. I'll just glue it back on here. So I just got some of my thin cyanoacrylate super glue. You need to be really careful with this stuff. Just gonna hit this with some accelerator. There we go. So it looks like these are 7/32 holes. So I'm just gonna gently run this drill bit in there just to clean out all the old glue, etc. Okay, so I ran the 7/32 drill bit through these holes just to clear out the old glue, or at least most of it. Yeah, so that's that. I just got this bag of abalone fret markers off of Amazon. It was like 10 or 11 bucks. So yeah, I'm gonna throw those in now. So I got all these pressed in here. Now what I'm gonna do is just go along and hit each one with a little bit of my thin super glue. Now I'm just gonna accelerate it to kick off this glue. So we got the new abalone, however you say it, fret markers in, and they are glued in. So now I'm going to re-radius the neck. I'm going to use these radius sanding blocks to reshape the fretboard. They're both the same radius, 16 inches. All right, so I'm just going to glue some 150 grit sandpaper onto these sanding blocks with some rubber cement. But here we go. So now the fretboard is flat all the way across. And also it has the new radius, the 16-inch radius on it. So now the fretboard is shaped. So now what I'm going to move on to is actually like polishing the fretboard. So here we got the 220. I'm going to give it a quick sand. Okay, now we got our 320 grit. So now we got 400 grit. And now 600. Okay, so now we're all done with the sandpaper. This is actually already a really nice, smooth fretboard. But what I'm going to even take it a step further and use this stuff called micro mesh. This micro mesh goes from 2400 all the way up to 12,000 grit. So ideally, I would go maybe do an 800 grit and then a 1000 grit and then do the 2400. But I don't have any. So I'm just going to jump from 600 to 2400. Not the best, but this will still give us a very nice finish. So we're going to go with a 2400, then 3200, 3600, 4000, 6000, 8000, and finally 12,000. Okay, so now we have the new fret markers in, and the fretboard is radiused and polished. It's looking pretty good if you ask me. I'm going to be installing some new frets in this neck. After that, I'm going to level them, polish them, and get this neck ready to rock. I'm going to be using these guitar frets, which I got from Stumac like a decade ago. They're medium guitar fret wire. I'm just going to run a fret saw through these frets and just make sure they're nice and cleaned out, and open up these ends again so that we can easily drive our new frets in there. Okay, so I got all those fret slots nicely cleaned out. So now that's done. All the frets are hammered in. It's looking good. As you can see, I probably could have cut them all a little bit shorter, but well, I just didn't care to. So now what I'm going to do is go along with my little clippers here, and I'm just going to snip all the fret ends a little bit closer to the fretboard. Okay, now I'm just going to file down these jagged edges. Those edges are all filed down, and I put a little bit of a bevel on them as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some masking tape on the fretboard to protect it. Now I'm going to level my frets. So I got a black marker here. I'm just going to color these frets all black so I can see where I'm sanding. Okay, so now I got my sandpaper on my level. I'm just going to gently rub this on my fretboard, and I will see if I have any high spots or low spots. So now I got my frets all leveled. So now I got to recrown the frets. So to do that, I've got a Stumac fret crowning file. So we got all the frets recrowned with the fret recrowning file. Now I'm just going to round the very edges of the frets with a little file. Okay, so now I got all my frets nicely filed on the edges. It's nice and smooth when I rub my fingers like this. The next thing I'm going to do is polish these frets up with some micro mesh. We're going to start with 2400 grit, 3200 grit, 3600, 4000 grit, 6000 grit, 8000 grit, 12,000 grit. Okay, so we're all done. Overall, I'm happy with this. It's definitely a lot cooler than it was. I'm going to plug these old mounting holes. So what I'm going to use is toothpicks. Just going to put some super glue in the hole. Just get some glue, make sure these are fully covered with glue. Got glue on them. Get them in the hole. And I'm just going to drive them in a bit. Make sure they're in there real good, and just repeat that for all 3 other holes. Now I'm just going to cut them off with some side cutters. And I'm just going to sand them down. Okay, so now I got my body back here. Next thing I'm going to do is flip it over and mark these holes for the neck bolts. So that looks as good a spot as any for this neck plate. So the next thing I got to do is locate my bridge. Just going to screw the bridge in. So now that the bridge is in, we got to install the spring claw, the springs, and of course the screws that hold the spring claw on. So now what I want to do is actually put a couple, the high E and the low E string on here, just so I can make sure my neck is lined up properly. So that means I got to put a couple of the tuners back in. Okay, so we got a couple of tuners, we got our nut, we got our bridge. Now I just got a high E and a low E string. Just gonna string it up. Okay, so I got the high E and the low E string on, and it's looking good. We got a nice amount of space on either side of them, going all the way down the fretboard. That means we put the neck and the bridge in the right spot, on the right angle. So now I feel confident to move on to making this pick guard. So let's just take the template I made and hold it up here. So when we have the pick guard lined up with our neck pocket, you can see that it's actually overlapping the bridge. Also, you can see the edge of the body through the pick guard hole for the pickup. It should be more forward like that. Okay, got the second template done, and it worked. It looks like it lines up nicely. So, yeah, got our problem solved with it. So the next step now is to use this to actually cut out the pick guard. Okay, so this is kind of sketchy. I don't know if this is gonna work, but here we go. So I should be able to just get that off of there. So we got our pick guard cut out. It's not the best job cutting it, but that being said, it's still okay. We can sand these edges smooth, and I think it'll be fine. So now I'm going to drill my mounting holes now. So the next thing I want to do is put a nice little bevel on some of these edges, but I think I'm just going to use a file. What I got going on here is, this is where we left off, except I've put some yellow tape on here to kind of mark out where my knobs and my switch are going to go. I've also got the center line, as well as where my strings, the low E and the high E are. So to get the positions for these, all I basically did was just take some old knobs I've got and just kind of put them where I thought they would look good, and then a little switch tip. And that's how I came to that solution. So, I mean, it's not really rocket science for that. I'm just going to line up this center line with this center line, and then kind of center these in the middle of the pickup holes. And then I'm just going to take this and I'm going to stab through the center of these mounting holes, and then I'll know where to drill. All right, so it looks good, I guess. So now I've got to drill the holes. I'm just going to countersink these holes I just drilled. So the pick guard is done. I'm just going to put the guitar together now to see how it all looks. I'm going to be getting this guitar body and headstock ready for paint. First things first, I have some wiring holes to drill. Into the output jack pocket, and into the spring cavity. So now that's done. When we put the pickguard on here and line up all the screw holes, this screw hole here and this screw hole here actually don't have anything underneath the pickguard to attach to. So I got this chunk of wood left over from when I cut the body out, and I'm just gonna cut a couple of slabs out of this and just glue them in there. Okay, so I was able to fix, so now this screw here and this screw here both have something to go into. So our screw hole problem is fixed. Okay, now that that's all done, I'm gonna be using some Bondo to fill in the body damage. So the thing with Bondo is you kind of want to start shaping it before it gets too hard, because it gets kind of hard to work with after that. Okay, so now I got most of the shaping done. I'm just actually going to mix up a second batch of Bondo here and just go over this one more time. Just going to put one more coat on there, and then I'm just going to go and let it harden up for a bit. So now I'm just going to start sanding this thing down. So I got a bit of sanding I got to do on my neck. I got to finish sanding this black paint off of here and sand all this stuff down to 150 grit. I also want to sand the rest of this old finish off. And yeah, so I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to sand the body down with 220 grit. I'm going to sand the neck down with 220 grit. And then I'll be ready to prime this thing. Okay, so we got the guitar body now sanded down with 220 grit. Got all the damage filled in with Bondo. See if we can get a good close up of that. So that was where we had one chip out. It's filled in and smoothed with Bondo. And then this is where the other chip out was. And that is filled in and completely smoothed out with Bondo. I've also filled in the holes I made when I was routering the control cavities. I fixed that little ding I just did there. And I got my neck pocket area made a bit better where it was kind of messed up. I've blown this off with my air compressor, so this is ready to prime. So I made a cool handle for the guitar body, so now I can hold it in one hand and spray it with the other. I've also taped off the guitar headstock so just the face is exposed. So I'm just going to be using this primer. So the first thing I'm going to do is spray a thin coat of primer on this body. And then I'm going to spray a thin coat of primer on the headstock. And I'm going to do a few thin coats until I get one opaque coat that is thick enough. And then I'm going to let that dry overnight. All right, so the guitar has been primed and I let it dry overnight. So I'll just show you what it looks like. Right off the bat, you can see the grain is really popping out. So that's okay. Show the back. Now I'm just going to fill in the grain. What I'm going to be using for that is some glazing putty. I don't know if I like this stuff. Maybe I'm using it wrong. It like dissolves the primer. Although the grain does seem filled now. So I don't know. Okay, so I'm just going to try sanding this. I got my 220 grit sandpaper here. Let's just see what we can get. Feels pretty smooth now. I'm just going to try repriming this, and then I'll be able to see if the grain is being filled in. So I tried the glazing putty, and then it kind of like peeled off the old primer, so I reprimed it after I sanded it. And it did fill in the grain some, and this is going to be hard to see on video, but like this grain I think is actually filled in. And the reason why you can see it is because it's got, I don't know, it's just thicker primer in the grain. So this is, so I think it worked. But I'm gonna try using the glazing body on the front of the guitar. Alright, I'm just gonna let this dry for a bit. I don't think I'm doing this right. Okay, so it's been a few hours. I've let this dry. Now I'm going to sand it down again. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so here we are. I gave this a real good sand with the 220 grit. And as you can see, the grain is filled in gray like a primer. So that gives me hope that I'm moving in the right direction. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to spray it again with some more primer. And then I'm probably going to have to sand it a couple more times. I'm not going to be using any more of that glazing putty. Um, it was kind of a experiment on my end. I've never used it before, and it's honestly not meant to be used on wood. I don't think anyway. So, anyways, there's that. I also sanded down the headstock, so I'm going to spray that again too. Okay, so this primer's had a chance to dry, but unfortunately, I can still see some of the grain showing through. So what I'm going to do is sand it down again with some 320 grit sandpaper. I've got it sanded down. I'm going to put some more primer on it. I just sprayed again on here, and there's still some grain showing through, like right there. There's some showing right there. I'm starting to get a little bit frustrated here, so I'm going to try a little bit of a different technique. So what I'm going to do is take this primer and just spray it into the cup or the lid. Then I'm going to take just a Q-tip. Probably a paintbrush would be a better option. And then soak it, and I'm just going to dab it on the areas where the grain is showing. So I've dabbed on some additional primer just where I thought it needed it to kind of fill in the grain that was showing still. You can see a little bit of, you can see it a little bit there. It's kind of hard to see. But anyways, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to let this dry. I'm going to put my heater on it and let it dry for a few minutes. Then I'm going to come back and spray another full coat of primer over top of this. And then I'm going to let that sit and dry for a few hours, and then I'll have to come back and sand it again. Okay, so now I'm just going to give it one more sand, and hopefully that's good enough that I can reprime it, and then it'll be ready to paint after that. Okay, so I sanded it down, and it ended up looking just great. So I'm going to put hopefully my last coat of primer on here, and then that'll be it for the prep work. Okay, so I'm finally done priming this, and I just want to show the difference of where the grain is filled to where it isn't filled. You can probably already see it. Inside this control area, where the pickups and the knobs and everything go, I have not filled the grain, but they have received the same amount of coats of primer as the rest of the guitar. So you can really see the difference that sanding between coats and filling the grain makes. I've decided I'm going to be painting the guitar body gold. I got this color called Sunburst Gold Metallic. These cans are meant for like if you have to do like a touch up on your car or something. This type of paint is called an acrylic lacquer. So I've actually got a couple of cans of acrylic lacquer clear coat. So once I paint the body with this, I'm going to put a nice clear coat over top of it. Now for the headstock. I know I said I was going to paint the headstock the same color as the body, but I've changed my mind. What I'm actually going to do is spray the headstock black. This is the same kind of paint as the body. It's acrylic lacquer, so I will also be able to spray a nice acrylic lacquer clear coat over top of it to get a really nice finish. I actually have a little bit of a surprise of what I'm going to do with this headstock, but you'll have to wait till later in the video to see that. It's going to be pretty sweet. It looks like I need to lightly sand with a scuff pad or 600 grit sandpaper. I'm going to get sanding. I'm going to be wearing this mask, so I'm not going to be saying anything. So maybe I'll just explain this before I put my mask on. I'm going to put a coat on with this. Then I got to wait 10 minutes. While I'm waiting 10 minutes, I'm going to put a coat of black on this. Okay? And I'm just going to go back and forth until I got decent opacity with this and decent opacity on my headstock with black. I forgot to mention that I'm spraying this in my garage with the big door cracked and the man door open to allow for airflow. Holy crap, this can is horrible. Look at this. Okay, I just gotta say, this duplicolor perfect match in the gold color specifically, I don't think these cans were spraying right. It's like half of the paint would end up stuck in this area right under the nozzle or in this area. I think they but the black stuff didn't do it. It was just the metallic, so I don't know. But I'm just saying, I would have liked to have seen a lot smoother finish on this guitar, but at this point, it is what it is. Alright, so it's been like a half an hour, and so this is dried enough that it's ready for the clear coat to go on. So, I'm not 100% stoked about how it turned out. I mean, there's a few drips and drools that happened because the paint can was spitting quite a bit. But you know what? I'm just gonna have to run with it. Okay, so here we are. I've let this actually dry overnight. It's got, about a can of clear coat on it. I've never tried this before, but I'm gonna try wet sanding this with some alcohol instead of water because the alcohol will evaporate faster. Alcohol is obviously super flammable, so don't try doing this around ignition sources. And hopefully my sandpaper won't get as clogged up. Seems to be working. Seems to be working nicely, actually. Okay, so now I got the whole body wet sanded with alcohol. Okay, so you see me put that last coat of clear on this guitar, and you know what? It's looking pretty good. That being said, I am gonna wet sand it again. I'm not gonna film myself sanding this again. You already seen me sand it before. It's gonna be the same thing. And yeah, so I'll cut back in when I'm putting another coat on it. All right, I'm back. So I'm just gonna put another coat of clear on here. So I mentioned I was gonna do something special with the headstock of this guitar. What I'm gonna do is put a gold DZ on it for Danger Zone. We're just gonna place it where it will look good on the headstock. Think about there will be fine. Tape it down with some painter's tape. Then we're just gonna use some of this gold paint that we painted the guitar body with. We're gonna let that sit for a minute because I don't want the paint to bleed under the stencil. Now here's where I messed up last time. I left this on here to dry. We want to take it off immediately. Alright, so we got a cool DZ on our headstock now. The next thing I'll do is put a nice coat of clear on this once it's dry. There we go. Got a beautiful clear coat over top of it. Now it's looking just great. It's going to be locked in forever. So now the clear coat on the headstock has had a chance to dry. I'm now going to peel off all the masking on the rest of the neck. mask off the fretboard, and get it ready to clear coat the rest of the neck. Okay, so now the neck is masked off and ready to clear coat. I'm gonna actually, before I do this, I'm just gonna wet sand the body again because I'm gonna clear coat them at the same time. All right, now that this lacquer has had a chance to dry, I'm just gonna give this neck a quick sand with some 600 grit. After that, I'm gonna start coating with a bit more lacquer, and I'm also gonna coat the body with some more lacquer. Okay, so this is gonna be my last application of lacquer on the guitar body and the neck. Now I've let these dry for a couple weeks, so I'm hoping that the lacquer is hard enough now that I can polish it up to a nice shine. So the first thing I'm going to do is just wet sand this with some 1500 grit sandpaper. So I got the body sanded down with a 1500 grit sandpaper. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand down my headstock. All right, so we got our headstock sanded down nice and flat. I got a new bowl of soapy clean water. I'm going to start with my 2000 grit sandpaper now. So I just finished sanding the body down with 2000 grit sandpaper. I've got to sand down the headstock with 2000 grit. So there we go. We got the headstock sanded down with 2000 grit. The next step is the compound. What I got here is some Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. So I got 4 towels here. I'm going to use one to put it on, one to take it off for this stuff. And then the next step, I also got some polish. We'll do the same kind of process. All right, so I hope this works. I've got to say, this Meguiar's Ultimate Compound, very impressive. This turned out so good. Like there, you can see me in the paint filming this. It's crazy how good this turned out. So this is a headstock after I sanded it with 2000 grit sandpaper. Now I'm going to try this Meguiar's Ultimate Compound on it. Alright, so I just got done with the Meguiar's on here with the Ultimate Compound. Man, it made a huge difference in how shiny this is. It's crazy. Just rubbing it by hand. Now, it's brought out a few flaws, but turned out real good. Turned out real, except for the flaws, but that's not the fault of the polish. That's my fault. All right, so now it's time for my final step in this polishing process. We're going to use some of this Meguiar's Ultimate Polish. I gotta say, this Ultimate Polish really made a big difference on this black finish. It looks so much better now. It's crazy. It's like a mirror. On the bright side, the buffing turned out amazing. But on the downside, it kind of brought out some defects in the underlying gold coat. You know, I had some serious issues with the gold paint. And well, they are presenting themselves now. The beautiful clear coat is a window, and like it's almost like the gold is translucent. Like you can see the grain through it. See what I mean? Like the clear coat is perfect. The gold coat is all messed up, and you can see like every imperfection in the gold. So yeah, that's kind of weird, right? And of course, on the headstock, there's a couple issues. Like I sanded through the primer when I was wet sanding, and also some water from the wet sanding soaked in and cracked the paint. But you know what? Whatever. I'm going to be selecting the electronics for the custom guitar I'm building. I'm building this guitar from scrap parts. That means I'll be picking everything out of this pile of old parts I've accumulated over the years. The first thing I'm going to do is put some shielding on the back side of the pickguard. It's a working man's shielding. Tin tape. Okay, so that's done. Now I'm going to install the pickups, the switch, and the two pots. Okay, so now we got our two pickups, our switch, and our two pots mounted on our pickguard. Now all we have to do is wire everything up. So what I'm going to do now is just go in to where my amp is, plug this in, and just make sure it all works as it's supposed to. Okay, so here we are. I got my amp, I got a cable running, coming down, plugged into the output jack of this pickguard. Bridge pickup works. Neck position. Neck pickup works. Middle. Both work. Let's turn the volume down. Nothing. Okay. Turn the volume back up. Okay. And now let's turn the tone down. Turn it back up. Okay, so our pickguard is wired up and it's working as it should. I'm going to finally be assembling this guitar that I've been working on for what seems to be an eternity. I guess maybe the first thing I'll start is just putting the bridge on here. So that's that. Now we'll just get the claw and the springs on the back. I guess the next thing we should do is just put some shielding in these cavities. So I got the tin tape shielding all done. You can see I've just lined the inside of the cavities completely with that. I had a couple people make comments that I should spray some of this deoxit into the pots because they're scratchy. So I'm going to do that first before I start assembling things. Alright, so hopefully that deoxit works its magic and these pots are good to go. I think I'm just going to peel this plastic now. Now that's done, just start screwing it on. So I guess now we gotta put together our output jack. Now we just have one more solder connection to make for our ground wire. Okay, so that's it for right now for our body. I'm just gonna put the rest of the neck together and then we'll join them together. Got a few things to reattach to the neck. The tuners, the string trees. So I guess the first thing I'll do is peel this tape. That went smoother than I anticipated. So I guess next we'll have to get all our tuners out. So I guess the first thing I'll do is put these little, I believe they're called ferrules in. So those are all pressed in. Now I'm just going to install the tuners. Okay, so we got the tuners back on. Now we just got to put these little string trees back on. Alright, so we're just going to reuse this old nut. Alright, so there's that. I guess now we got to attach the neck to the body. Okay, so here we go. Alright, so we just need a few more things like knobs, switch tip, some strap buttons, but I got my old trusty tackle box full of guitar parts from way back. And I'm pretty sure we got what we need. So these are our choices for the knobs. You know what, I think I'm just going to go with these black ones. I think it'll look better overall with the guitar if we just go with black. Next we need some switch tips. I got this, which appears to be a 5-way selector switch tip. hopefully we can somehow thread this 5-way switch onto that. I'm gonna put this camera down. Okay, well, that actually worked. So we got that figured out. Cool, now we need a whammy bar. So hopefully this will match the threads in here. She's loose. So that's not gonna fly. So that's a bummer. The one whammy bar I do have won't fit, so we'll have to get a whammy bar for it. And then we need some strap buttons. So I do have a few different strap buttons in here. Let's just go with these. Now the question is, where do I want to put my upper horn strap button? So let's just put it right there. It'll be weird, but it's not that weird, I don't think. There we go. Just got a set of these Ernie Ball hybrid slinkies. I like them. Honestly, these strings are going to get ruined. It's just setting this guitar up, so they're only temporary. So now I just need to set the action, set the intonation, and test it all out. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the action. So this is where we're at right now with the action. To me, that seems really high at the nut. Down here, these saddles are kind of just set how I put them in here. So they need to be kind of matched to the contour, the radius of the fretboard. Basically what I'm going to do is just set these as low as I can so that I can play all the notes and not have them fret out. And then I'm going to work on the nut. We got the saddles roughly set to where they need to be so I can hit all these notes and not have them fret out. Now I'm going to focus my attention on the nut. So I feel like maybe there's a little bit of something in the nut slot, like that the actual nut sits in, that's preventing it from sitting down properly. I'm just going to take the nut out and have a look in there. So yeah, the problem I think is actually this slot. Also, there's some crap on the back of the nut as well. So maybe we'll get rid of that and we'll clean this out a bit. Okay, so I ended up cleaning out this slot using this little triangular file. And it worked out pretty good. Now we'll put the nut back in. We're just gonna give it a kiss with the wood glue. And then I'll just spread that a little bit. Then we'll put it in the slot. Then we'll get our strings back on here and then they'll clamp it into position. It'll be dry before you know it. Now we're going to set our intonation. So when you hit an open note, right, you want the fretted note at the 12th fret to be the same. So you can see on this, we're sharp. So that means we got to actually make the string a little bit longer. So the low E string is intonated. So now we're just going to go and do all the other strings. I didn't have a whammy bar, so I ordered this one off of Amazon. Beautiful. So now we're all done. So I'm just going to go in, plug this into my amp, and we're going to see how it sounds. Let's try the clean sound on the bridge pickup. distorted sounds now. This is what the bridge pickup sounds like with just the gain on this amp. So this project is done. It didn't turn out perfect, but it turned out better than I anticipated. Plus, I learned a couple of things along the way, so hopefully my next project will turn out better. I'm going to play this guitar for a bit and then decide if I'm going to change anything. To be honest, I'm not happy with this gold finish, and just looking at it makes me mad. So there'll probably be a refinish video for this guitar in the future. Let me know in the comments what color you think I should paint it if I do refinish it. That's it for this build. If you found that interesting, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I put out a new 10 to 15 minute video every week, and I'll be starting a new bass guitar build next week. And if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. Until next week,